So anyway, we'll talk about the commandments now. So the seventh commandment, we'll talk about seventh, eighth, and 10 commandments. And they're pretty straightforward, but there's actually a lot of good material to think about or reflect on. So the seventh commandment is pretty straightforward. Don't steal. That's pretty obvious what that means. But there's a lot of stuff in it that you may not be aware of. In fact, this is a good even reflection for me to put this together, to think about all the ways that, the implications that these things have. So really we have to think about the goods of the world in two respects. One is that God has created everything, so everything in that sense belongs to Him, and it's intended to be used by everybody. So for example, the earth doesn't belong to any one person or one nation, it belongs to everybody. And it's given for everyone to use in a certain respect. So there's kind of a universal destination of goods that we have to keep in mind. But there's also a legitimate ownership of things, that people can own things, but even that is not like an absolute of like, we only own this for my benefit, and it doesn't matter how else it might hurt somebody else. So we do have kind of that distinction in mind, but there is a legitimate ownership of property. And we're meant to respect and value how other people have things. So it is not legitimate at all to just say, well, this belongs to everybody, and kind of like it's all family style. I can take your food, or I can use your home whenever I want, or whatever else. It belongs to everybody, and that's not exactly true. A good virtue to think about in the context of ownership of things is justice. So it's giving people what is owed to them. And what I would say is that, for example, justice, we'll talk about this a little bit, but it does involve employers, involves, employees, involves, what is owed to people for what they've done in giving them their goods or, paying for their services and so forth. So that is also part of not stealing. What I would also say is the church instructs us to give our best for the guests, the sick, the poor, and to kind of even go beyond just what is owed to people from a strictly justice standpoint of I don't have to give you this. We see it as a work of charity, that sharing what we have with other people and giving not just our worst always, but giving our best. And there's a very venerable tradition in the church of especially welcoming the guest, and it's a command the Lord gives us. But kind of especially Benedictine monks, they have this philosophy of treating the guest as if this person is Christ. And so they give this person the best treatment, their best food, all this stuff. And I once stayed at a monastery in Italy, and I did a retreat there, and they did treat me very well. They didn't have red carpet for me, but besides that, they really treated me quite well, in that they kind of just provided everything. They welcomed me and they treated me very respectfully, and I think they were very faithful to that that spirit then. So that's definitely a tradition that exists in the church of giving people our best as an act of charity. So in other words, sharing our stuff. How we define stealing though is basically taking something that belongs legitimately to somebody else that goes against his or her intentions or will. So it is not stealing, for example, if you have a best friend or a family member or something, and you kind of have this arrangement, unspoken maybe, of you can borrow each other's stuff or use it, and you don't even need to ask. That's not stealing then. Even if you didn't ask to borrow something, it's not. But let's say you come and borrow my stuff or something. Well, we don't have that arrangement, do we? But so you just come well, I'm sure Father Barnes wouldn't mind. If I borrowed his car or something. Maybe I wouldn't if you asked. But taking my car without asking, even if you're intending to give it back, it would still be wrong because I may not have willed to give you the keys to my car. and for you to use it in whatever way that you were going to. So that's kind of what it means, is you certainly have to respect and appreciate what other people are thinking. What it violates is really a person's right to that his or her like property, in that people have ownership of things for the good of themselves, their families, and the world, and we don't have a right to violate the person's like property. What it also extends to is this whole list of stuff, though, that I have kind of here, including bribery, tax evasion, forgery, not paying your bills, or even just being like excessively wasteful, or spending more than perhaps is really necessary. And not to be scrupulous about these things, but there's a legitimate like sense of, I don't know if you ever heard like this growing up or something, but if you didn't like eat all your dinner, that someone says you're taking food from the starving African or something. I mean, literally you're not. That food's not going to end up there, and that person's not going to eat that food. But there is a sense of wasting food, or wasting your stuff, or not treating it well, in a certain sense is kind of stealing from like other people, because you're just not using things in the way that it's really intended to be used. And so that's how all these things kind of work. So there's honesty in all these different arrangements. Being wasteful or expensive, you can be scrupulous about those things, but those things legitimately do exist. Of like, imagine if you were just truly wasteful and you hurt your family or hurt your friends or whatever else. Like, that would not be, in a way, you're kind of stealing from that person. There's a sense of making reparation for what's stolen. So if you steal like $1,000 from somebody, you never would do that, but let's say you did. And if you came to confession, you said, "Yeah, I stole $1,000 from my friend." The thing I'm going to ask you is, well, did you give it back? And if no, I spent it, and it's gone. I'm never going to make reparation for it. Say, well, then you're really not. I wouldn't be so blunt, but say, well, then you're really not sorry, because if you are sorry for what you've stolen, then you will make reparation for it. What is necessary is we try to make as best as possible complete reparation. So if you stole $1,000, you need to give back $1,000. But sometimes we could also steal like a good that maybe didn't have a material value. Like, how do you assess that? Well, you try to make like an estimation of it then. Or it's also possible that you could steal something that goes like beyond your ability to make complete reparation for, such as so let's say you stole like a vast sum of money and you don't have like the ability to pay it all back. Like, you kind of never will. Well, you try to make as best as possible reparations for that, and that's how you kind of indicate that you're sorry. And actually, that sort of thing it kind of exists with like taxes and stuff. Sometimes they kind of cut a deal. You say, okay, I can't pay back all that, but I'll pay back like this. And you say, okay, fine, we'll call it even, sort of thing. But it's necessary to make some kind of reparation. What we could also say is that if let's say you stole something from like I don't think anybody can do this anymore because no one buys like CDs, but let's say you stole like a CD from Target, and not to be too precise with examples, maybe like after a while you're really sorry about it. You think, well, I can't go back into Target and hand them the CD, like, yep, here, I stole it. You think, well, how do I give this thing back? And so what you can do is, like, you're not obligated to go, like, in a sense, fess up to it, where you have to go, like, into Target and say, like, yep, here's what I stole. Now you can, like, arrest me or something. What you can do is you could mail something anonymously, like, to them, even the good back. It could just be mailed to them. Or if like that's not even quite possible, you can make a contribution to the poor. And you're doing that with the intention of making reparation for what's done, in the sense of, God will use that to bring about good too. So that's how we can make reparation for things, even when, it's a little hard to do it directly. Gambling. Gambling is not like per se prohibited. I mean, or playing games that involve some sort of gambling, that's not, per se like morally wrong. It certainly can be if it's taken away from other things that are legitimate. If you just play like some card games with your friends or whatever from time to time, I mean, like, it's kind of up to you. I mean, like, that's not necessarily a sin or anything. Going, I think, to a casino and spending a lot of time there, or even a lot of like your money, particularly money that should be used for other things, I mean, that is clearly a sin. Like, that is wrong. Not to mention, there's also kind of like, well, what if you're just like stiffing people with your, or not stiffing, but taking advantage of other people when they're gambling with you, and you're kind of just taking their money, like, that's not right either. I don't mean like you bet on like a football game, but like if you kind of are extorting money from somebody another way, such as, someone's kind of addicted to gambling and you're kind of just like taking advantage of that person or whatever, that's not right either. So that's kind of the situation with gambling. And then we also say there's like a respect for all of creation. So even not just money or material goods, but there is such a thing as like respecting the environment and treating it that it belongs to everybody. So just going and like intentionally polluting like someone else's, or throwing trash on someone else's property in a way that's sort of stealing from them or stealing from the good of the community, because you're harming everybody by doing that, and you're kind of taking away like the beauty, the goodness, or whatever of how things should be. The social doctrines of the church that I was kind of getting at with like work and stuff. So there is such a thing as like a just wage, and treating people in a way that gives them their due. So for example, let's just say I start a business, and my business is people are going to like wash cars for me or something, and I pay them like $1 an hour. Well, you could say, well, they're agreeing to work for me or whatever, and that's all I'm paying them. Well, we all know that that's not going to be enough to kind of live on, or really not commiserate with, the work that person is doing. So there's a need to pay someone, a salary that, corresponds, that this person could kind of live off this. Now, it gets a little complicated with certain jobs, so they're really not intended to be jobs to be lived off of either. There could be like a teenager job or just a starter up thing, and so it gets a little complicated on like the precise amount of stuff. But the basic theory is that it's really going back to how things like kind of maybe rampant capitalism, where there's just no like concern at all that you can just treat people in whatever way you want, and I mean, however they get treated is irrelevant to you because you're just making a lot of money. That's essentially wrong. It's not okay to just, even if you're paying them money, it's not okay to kind of treat them as your slaves. So there's a dignity that comes with all work, and that needs to be honored and respected. And that's where the church talks about such a thing as like a just wage for what you're doing. With that also, there's such a thing as like a strike. So in Italy, they have all kinds of strikes. I mean, the word is sciopero, and they have all kinds of, they do a lot of strikes on Fridays. Go figure. And it's Friday afternoon, and all of a sudden the trains, we're not going to work. That's kind of how they do their strikes there. Like, we're going to strike on Friday from 2 to 5, and then it's the weekend. And I always have Monday off. Oh wow, you really picked a good Friday. That happens all the time there. What they mean by strike is really we're all going to come together and we're going to take time off without accounting as time off. That's what they mean by strike. That is not what we're talking about with like striking. It is a legitimate thing that workers can come together and do something like that, where they're trying to exert their influence on people to do things in a more just way. But striking again is not so common like in our area, or certainly kind of with our like economic initiatives and stuff like that. But it is something that the church says that is legitimate to do when like there are grave injustices going on. Not like I want 25 days off a year instead of 20. I mean, I think you could argue, well, 20 is probably within the line of like reason there. But let's say you had this job and you need this job. I mean, like you don't get paid that much. You kind of live like paycheck to paycheck, and you can't afford to go find another job, or there aren't other jobs for you to get, and you are really dependent on this job just to live. And your boss is like, well, I know you have like 8-hour shifts, but we'll call them 12. And I know you have like 2 weeks off a year, but I mean, like, if you want to keep working here, you better not take that. And you can kind of see how people could get in a situation where, like, individually by yourself, you're really being taken advantage of by someone who's in a position to take advantage of you, and that's not right. That's why the church says there are means by which someone who's not powerful on his or her own, but to be associated with other people and to make sure that like stuff like that doesn't happen. So that's what it means with kind of labor unions and stuff like that. There's also such a thing as just love for the poor and works of mercy. That's an important aspect of, I think, the church. And we'll talk about that with the 10th commandment, with kind of detachment from material things. The final thing I want to mention is that there's this concept of the Jubilee year in the Old Testament, in the book of Leviticus, where imagine someone who has this very grave debt, that you have accumulated this debt and you're never going to pay it off, basically, because you're just never going to make enough money, or it's just going to take, like 40 years or whatever else. But a Jubilee year was established as a way that maybe during this year we kind of make an arrangement where your debt could be reduced or even dismissed or forgiven. That's actually what we have going on right now in the church, is this Jubilee year. It's called the Jubilee Year of Mercy. It started December 8 and it's going to November 30th this fall. It doesn't mean that if you have debts right now, like your mortgage, that it's going to get paid off. But you can try. What we're really talking about in the church is the concept of thinking about just our sins and knowing that, in a way, like none of us deserves forgiveness. None of us deserves the second chance, and yet we're going to get it. So we're just being so grateful to God that, like, as a kind of a Jubilee rejoicing, we get to experience like the forgiveness of debts and so forth in a special way. That's always possible in the church, but we're just trying to emphasize that point during this year. So that's what a Jubilee year kind of extends to as well. So the way we can associate that with material things is, imagine if somebody like owed a person a lot of money. Let's say, I loaned my sister all kinds of money or something, and you say, oh, you'll pay me back over time, and that's a fair arrangement. But then you say, well, I know that it's so hard for you to pay this back. What if we kind of made a new arrangement that's a little bit easier even? That'd be kind of like a merciful thing to do. I know money and family is complicated. I'm not so much suggesting that, but just more kind of the idea of out of your like abundance, you're willing to maybe share something with a person that you otherwise didn't have to. So we'll move on to the 8th commandment. Pretty straightforward again. Just don't lie. So what else is there to say? Well, we have to just a little theology to the truth and stuff is that God is the truth of everything. That to lie is, we know that Satan is the father of lies. So lying is not just something like, well, I know I lied, but oh well. Lying is a serious thing, and it's a really bad thing to do because it does directly go against God, who, loves us the way we are, and lies somehow believing that we need to be something that we're not. It again constitutes a matter of justice. People have a right to the truth. So, if I were to ask you, like, have you been coming to like RCIA and do you feel ready to become Catholic? And you tell me, yeah, I mean, I've done everything I need to do, but you haven't or something. And don't get scrupulous now. I just mean you're like, if I asked you, have you done like some of the readings? And you're thinking like, I haven't touched that book once. And you're like, yep, I did them all, Father. Like that would be a lie. Like I have a right to know. That's a legitimate question. And it doesn't mean that like you're a bad person or anything. It's just like, well, if I ask like, did you do the readings? Not this is class. I mean, I have a right to, hear the honest truth. Sometimes people though don't have a right to something, and we'll kind of get to that too. There is a duty to bear witness to the truth as well. So in other areas of our life, not just here tonight, but in your other arenas, we do have an obligation to share what is good and true. It doesn't mean you have to like throw it in people's face. In fact, please don't. But if someone were to ask you like, hey, do you ever think about like praying or something? And you're like, I don't know if this is you're like, I don't want to embarrass myself. You're like, no, I never pray. Like you should like tell people something like that, or tell them like, yeah, actually there is a God. I believe in him, and so forth, because that's true. And like part of giving witness to the truth is even speaking up when it's hard. Now there are situations of like, is it prudent to really go down like open up this can of worms right now? Like if someone at work were to ask you kind of a loaded question, you don't have to go say, well, let's take 30 minutes and dive right into it here. You might sense of, maybe this is not the right place or the right time to go into that. So you can answer in a way that, like is truthful, but you're also kind of saying this is just, to say this, but you can kind of get at it from a point of, okay, we don't have to go into like everything that concerns that right now. For example, if someone were to ask you at work like a very hot topic, like controversial question, and you think, if I go into this too much, this really could cause some big problems here. It doesn't mean you lie, but you're also saying maybe we're not going to like pop this thing open in a way that is ultimately just going to be hurtful or unhelpful. And we never want to share aspects of our faith in a way that, are just, it's hurtful or mean or judgmental, all that stuff. So how you do that, you only learn that through prudence, and I'm figuring it out myself. So it's something that, like sometimes we do it okay, and other times, we kind of stick our foots in our mouths. So we just continue to try our best. What mine, like really concerns especially is we have a proper concern for other people's reputations. So it would be, it's not just unkind, but people have a right to their good reputations. So to lie about somebody or to harm someone else in a way would also be wrong. And so we should presume that the best about people. So even if you think that, if you're like, Father Barnes probably doesn't even prepare for his homilies, he just gets up there and, like says whatever's on his mind. And you're like, he just, just does the worst stuff. Okay, that might be true. But you can at least presume like, well, he probably does try. And it's charitable to say like, he probably is trying his best, may not have the best results or the best product, but, like we should say that, it'd be mean just to say like well, that person's just the worst. That someone may not live up to your expectations. You asked them to do something and they didn't do it right. You could say, well, maybe I didn't explain it well. Or maybe that person tried, but just couldn't do it any better. You don't have to then go into like, well, you must be the worst, and let me tell other people about how bad you are too. Like that's where the problem comes in, where you're like, you wouldn't believe like the idiot I work with, and like let me tell you all the ways this person is an idiot. And when I'm done, like you'll see what I'm talking about. That's sinful. It doesn't mean that people are not, like dumb sometimes, but the fact is like we're kind of dumb. All of us are sometimes, and we do have to say like it never hurts to take the most charitable explanation about someone in a situation. It's like maybe there's something I just don't know about it that would alter my perception of this. So always trying to interpret things in the most favorable way. Now let's say, for example, you think someone could be lying to you. You don't know for sure, but you think. Maybe let's say you're a supervisor at work and someone comes in late and the person's like, yeah, I just had a flat tire. I'm sorry I couldn't get here earlier. And you're thinking like, I bet you just overslept because your hair is, rumpled. And I mean, like, I know you have overslept before and this seems to kind of fit your pattern. Well, I mean, like, that has its own consequences at work, right? And you kind of have to kind of sort these things out. But to just say like, no, liar, I know you're lying. You don't know for sure. Maybe that person really did have a flat tire that day. So to say like automatically that person is lying is not right either. If you have other reasons to believe that, and all that stuff, but you just can't go into like, well, I know when you don't know. There's also such a thing as like the gravity of what we could be lying about. Obviously, if someone were to ask you something about yourself and you're kind of like a little bit ashamed to admit it, it's wrong, I guess. Like, for example, if someone were to ask me, like, Father Barnes, did you get a 4.0 in high school? I'm kind of ashamed to admit I didn't. I didn't, don't worry. You don't have to say, like, well, I got a 2.0. And that's actually the truth. You don't have to say like I got all my grades are just 2.0 or whatever. And also I got cut from every sports team I tried out for, and like no one ever went to me to the dances, and you don't have to go into like all the truth there. But it'd be wrong to say like, well, I did pretty good in high school, and maybe wasn't the best athlete, but I was second, or like you don't have to give the impression of that stuff. So there's such a thing as like the gravity of lying though too, and that's how it can be like associated with like how grave the sin is to lie. If it's kind of like some of these lies, like okay, like those are wrong, that's sinful, but some lies can even extend into like how this harms another person, how this affects people's like perception of you. And what if you wrote on your resume that like actually I did quite well in this college and I graduated when you didn't? And there's been some famous examples of this, of like coaches who've gotten hired and then they figure out that like there was something actually quite wrong, and then people object, and then they're like, oh, I guess we kind of have to fire this guy now. And that happens probably more often than I'm aware of in professional environments, of people just lying on their resumes or stuff like that. Like that's a very grave sin to tell somebody something that's totally false to like try to get the job that you want, when you know that, like, I mean, if they hire you, they're hiring you under false pretenses. It can even cause, violence to another person if you're lied. Like, what if you lied about to get this job and someone else who was actually qualified didn't get the job because of, like, you kind of stole the job from another person through your lie? Well, you've done violence to another person in a way because that person maybe really needed that job or deserved that job. So you can kind of see how lying, if you're just trying to better yourself, it could hurt another person too. Not just by reputation either. There's sharing the truth, but you don't have to be uncharitable when sharing the truth. So there's, if someone asks you a question, you don't have to answer in a way that's very unflattering. You can think of different examples, I'm sure, with that. So there's an appropriateness to revealing something. And that kind of leads us into like secrets and stuff. Like, are secrets, permissible? The one thing, just to get right off the table, is that anything that's said in confession, that's part of the confessional like secret, the seal of confession, and there's no exceptions to that ever. So the priest is bound by this commandment to never reveal anything about that. So it would be wrong to reveal those secrets. Nothing else is quite ever on that level, where no one else ever has a right to know what's said in confession. Other things, though, certainly deserve like discretion and even keeping things to yourself. There can be reasons why, like, professionally people would keep secrets. For example, sometimes people are like considering like if we're gonna hire somebody or promote somebody or like let somebody go or these sorts of things, and you're like, well, it'd be obviously very harmful to just like let kind of rumors out like that, and people really don't have a right to know like perhaps internal deliberations about stuff like that. So it's not wrong if someone were to say like, I don't want you to tell people about this right now because it's unsettled, we're not ready to go forward with the decision, and to kind of indicate that that might be the case, like would do damage. And so you can clearly see how like, well, there's a right to kind of keep this information, like on a need-to-know basis. It, can also concern like our private lives, and we should consider that with other people too. So none of you hear confessions, so you're not bound to this, but if someone were to tell you like, I don't know, for whatever reason, like, like, hey, these are all the sins I made in my confession. I don't know why you would do that, but someone tells you anyway. That's really not, okay, no one's like bound you to keep this secret, but there's something wrong about telling other people about like, hey, like, guess what so-and-so told me. And telling people about, that just concerns matters of that person's private life. No one else really has a right to know about this stuff too. So this all stuff falls under this eighth commandment of, like basically telling people things that they need to know, or in some cases don't need to know. Some of the more fun examples could come up with like, what if like, actually kids ask these things, and I tell them you're in trouble for asking hard questions. But they'll ask me like, what if like the Nazis were like looking for you and you're hiding Jews? Because they probably read this in a book somewhere, and like they think they're really clever now. So then they'll like, is it okay to like lie? And you can think of other things like that too. Okay, first of all, some of these things are extreme. The Nazis don't exist anymore, but let's just say they did, and or other things like, let's say I'd hope that if the government ever were like looking to like, hurt priests or something, that some of you would be willing to hide me, and I'd appreciate that. So let's just say you're really nice and were willing to do that, and you kind of like give me a little cave to live in or whatever, and you kind of hide me in your basement. And one day, the police come by and they're like, do you have any priests in your house? And you say, well, do I have to tell them the truth? And so you can kind of see how that gets a little complicated. And different theologians have like different explanations about it. Like, is that the commandment never to lie is pretty clear, and government does have a right to know like legitimate information, such as if the police come out like, hey, did you see anything about this crime? Or, like people have a right, the government has a right to find these things out. You can't just say like, I don't know nothing from nowhere. Like that's not exactly true either if you did witness something. However, no one has a right to, you'd say like, and even if, I could be a legitimate fugitive of the law, okay, like, and then it is wrong to hide a legitimate fugitive. But what we're talking about with, let's say, like hiding like Jews is that's not a real crime. Like they haven't done something that just because of their, faith and ethnicity, that doesn't mean they've committed like a crime. So searching them out for this crime is really not legitimate. And so you don't have to then, in fact, you shouldn't tell the Nazis that come knock on your door that, yeah, I got several Jews upstairs. You want to grab them? They've been eating all my food, actually. No, and then what are they going to do with you? So you do not have to reveal them. Some people kind of joke and say, let's say you have like Father Barnes in your basement, and they ask you, are there any priests in your house? And you're like, there aren't any. You're like, nope, no priests. There's a priest, just not priests. That's, obviously you're kind of still deceiving when you say something like that, because they're kind of asking, do you have one or several? They're asking like only several. If you have one, then that's okay. There's kind of that stuff. If it ever comes up, we'll talk more about it. But yeah, please hide me. I'd appreciate that. If that makes sense. But So we're never permitted to intentionally deceive somebody. It's just that there can be those extreme situations where people don't have a right to know that like this person's there just to kill them for no good reason, even if it were the government or something, that they don't have a right to do that. So I guess we have to say, that's these extreme things you can think about in that way. We can just keep plowing through here and go to the 10th commandment. So 10th commandment, I think it isn't as much stuff to discuss with this, but the most important part of it is the intentions of your heart. And that's sort of what the 9th commandment is getting at too, with your intentions of like, it's possible to sin even just with things that take place in your heart. So you don't have to necessarily commit any actions to commit sins. And you're probably thinking like, that's pretty unfortunate. But it's the truth, and it makes perfect sense. Such as, let's say, I don't know, you really like my coat or something, and you think like, it's a nice coat. I wish I had something like that. In fact, like maybe if I stole it, then I would have that. And you're kind of thinking about like, I don't think you deserve to have a coat like that. I do though, and it kind of makes me sad that you have it and I don't. And so I know I'm not going to steal from you because then everyone would judge me here and whatever else. So I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to kind of secretly hold in my heart this desire to do that, or like if I could, I would, sort of thing. I can't, but I mean, I still kind of have this harboring taking place in my heart. That happens, like all the time with other things, such as, let's say someone got the recognition or the attention. You're like, boy, I wish I got that too. I don't know if that person really deserved it. I could have deserved it, and think how great that would have been. That happens all the time. We call that. It's the difference is that you can like say, I wish I had gotten that award. Maybe like if you're on a sports team and they're picking like the MVP and you worked hard and they pick one person over you. It's okay to say like, I wish I had gotten that. I worked hard and I kind of wanted it. Disappointed I didn't. That's not sinful. What becomes sinful is when you say like, that person didn't deserve it though. I did, and I'm kind of really unhappy in my heart. I'm going to be envious of that person. Like, I can't believe that person got that. And so envy is the sin that we're really talking about here. Envy for what other people have that you wish you did, or that in a way, you could say the proper response is, I worked hard, I wanted this award, I didn't get it, could have gone my way, or maybe like the judges were all biased or something, and you can say, well, that person got it, that's just kind of the way that thing went. And you don't have to become envious of another person. Because what ends up happening is it takes over and conquers your heart when that person may not even know about it. No one else may know about it, but you just kind of like, every time you see that person, you think like, oh, again, like that, I can't believe you. And the person is like, I had no idea that you were so mad at me. If they said, if I had known this, I would have just given it to you. But what you're really kind of after is not so much like that award or that possession, but there's something that's kind of lacking in your heart. So it's reflective of what's really missing in your life. And that's probably the deeper question to ask is, why do you feel that like your life or your satisfaction is so incomplete in this moment, that like without this additional money or possession or recognition or fame or whatever else, like why do you need that to be complete? And we all know that greed isn't something that is it never satiates itself. We never say like, well, if I just had a little bit more money, or if I was just a little bit more famous, or if everyone recognized me a little bit more, you wouldn't say like, okay, finally I'm satisfied with, I got what I needed and now I'm good, but I could use a little more. And you kind of keep going up that ante there, And objectively, you could say, like, look how much stuff you already have, and look how well people treat you, and look at all the blessings you have, which are truly, like, in many respects, like, undeserved. And you kind of are basically ungrateful. So the virtue you're trying to cultivate, this we can associate this commandment with, is gratitude. That if you learn to be grateful for the things you do have, you're not going to be envious for the things that you don't have. And that's what it means to live, I think, a good and happy, like, Christian life by recognizing that everything we have comes to us from God. And again, going back to kind of the universal destination of goods, everything that we have is not, like, we didn't make the world, we didn't, give ourselves all this stuff. Like, I didn't give myself my intelligence. Maybe you worked hard, you studied in school, you did stuff, but at the same time, like, you were blessed in ways that got you there that were totally beyond your control. So recognizing that I'm just thankful for the many ways that God has been good to me. And we now have to use these things to benefit other people. So we're never about trying to acquire fame or riches or whatever else just for our own sake, because that doesn't benefit anybody. It's also like, if we do have these blessings, to appreciate them and to have a appropriate detachment from them, that they don't make you happy or complete. It's okay to be rich, or it's okay to be famous. It's not sinful to have even a lot of stuff. But a good way to think about it is, like, what if you end up having, like, too much stuff? You become, like, a little bit enslaved to it, to where you're like, if I even had more stuff, and you're kind of taking it from perhaps other people. So a good way to avoid this is to do acts that give your stuff away or share your stuff with other people. And that also helps you to not be envious of other people's stuff, because you're detaching yourself from your own things, so you're not just desiring more things. A good example, I think, is even like making charitable contributions with money, that when you give just even a little bit away, you're saying, like, money isn't the only thing to me. And you kind of end up being surprised by, you think, like, actually when you start to give a little bit away, you think, boy, I didn't know I was so rich in a way, because you find out I could live without that, and I didn't need it, and I'm just so grateful for what I do have. This is just a token of my appreciation that all my needs are taken care of. Another good thing to do is to extend, I think, the blessings that we're able to other people, when maybe for, like, families and stuff. Like, not everyone in your families may have the same blessings you have, so to kind of share them with other people too is a great way to detach yourself from just kind of having more, and then you don't invite people over to show off, like, look at all my great stuff, look at all my fancy stuff that you don't have, and you're kind of showing in their face. Like, that is not that's not good either. But what you are kind of teaching is, I just want to show you, hopefully in a good way, that, like, I appreciate and value you, not I'm trying to be a show off here. One thing I forgot to mention with stealing, which is actually a good anecdote, is what if, is it ever okay to steal, in a sense? And kind of the same thing with the lying question. So with stealing, we mentioned that there was this universal destination of goods, and what if, like, someone was legitimately, like, starving? Like, do you have a right to basically go steal food? And the answer is yes. The different theologians have, like, talked about how and why, and here's the explanation behind it. Let's say I hadn't, like, eaten all day, and maybe I'm not starving to death, but I'm certainly famished or whatever, and I won't name anybody, but let's say you're over there just and you got all this food, and you seem to have a complete abundance of it. Like, you should probably share it with me, But let's say you don't. Does someone have a right to say, like, I see poor Father Barnes over there. I'm just going to steal this sandwich from you and give it to him? Is that stealing? And if someone's legitimately like in need of something that you have a right to, which is food, people have a right to eat and need to eat to live. What you're doing is that person in justice should have been giving you that food anyways, if that makes sense. So in justice, people have an obligation to distribute what is necessary to someone else. And you can, if someone like doesn't give it like kind of willingly, there's still like an understanding of this can be like done in a way that makes it happen, even if the person didn't like intend to like give this to you. That's uncommon. So don't say like, well, I'm a little bit hungry, I'm going to take half your lunch. Okay, that's not what we're really getting at. We're talking about, dire needs that like have to be met, and you just have to do what has to be done. Now, let's say, for example, no one had a car here, and there was a true emergency, and my car keys were lying out here, and you had to drive someone to the hospital. It's like the only option. Well, stealing my car, you're going to give it back, but even borrowing it without my permission is then acceptable from the sense of this had to be done, and even though I didn't like give you my permission, under the circumstances, it kind of doesn't matter. Like you just had to do what needed to be done to like save this person's life or to do whatever else. So that's what it means, that people don't have this absolutely right to their stuff, even if it's like it means the detriment to another person, perhaps even a grave detriment. So that just came to me. I wanted to mention that, the whole stealing thing. So I guess, like those are the 7th, 8th, and 10th commandments, and they're pretty straightforward, but I think that they are actually really good reflections. And as I said, when I was doing this, I kind of thought like, I'm a worse person than I realized. Just all the little ways of like, can I be envious of someone else's things? Like in what ways am I untruthful, or in what ways, do I hurt someone else's reputation or not respect people's property? These are all really important like questions, and they affect our daily life, just our day-to-day interactions with other people. And I kind of already mentioned this with confession, but sometimes people, this is not revealing confessional secrets, sometimes someone mentioned that he or she lied as like a sin, and you're like, okay, fair enough. Now what if someone describes it as like a white lie? Well, there's no such thing as a white lie. In a way, it's sort of like what color lies do you tell? Red, blue, or blue lies really serious, but white's, like not serious. There is a sense of like even small lies are still not okay. And so there's a good honesty of saying like, I lied. Even if it's a small lie, but just trying to be like upfront about it, as opposed to saying like, well, I wasn't exactly truthful. Okay, that's true, but you're really kind of like beating around the bush, and you're also kind of, like we're not really acknowledging what's taking place. So that's just a good tip, I think, for lying. Another I think pitfall that we all run into is when it comes to certain things, like, well, you kind of write it off, like, well, I know I wasn't quite truthful, but because I didn't want to get into trouble. In fact, kids do that all the time. I mean, mom's like, did you brush your teeth? Yep, I did. And they're like, no, I didn't. And you kind of think like, you may not give it much more thought. And I don't know if kids always give it much more thought either. Like, well, I know I lied and I didn't want to get into trouble. Or I was afraid of what someone else might think of me. And, so we kind of don't always give that a lot of thought, but it's good to, the truth sets us all free at the end. And so again, another, quaint expression, but, honesty is the best policy. And it really just sets us all free to know that, like, if we're afraid to tell somebody something that, like, if I tell this person the truth, they're going to get mad at me. It actually always makes us feel better when we're like, finally, I got it out there, and I kind of told you what was going on, and now we can at least deal with it. Whereas before you're kind of like having this internal like struggle. And it's something that happens with small things and big things. So that's just another tip with lying. And then the final thing I would say with certain things about like lying is you don't have to tell people like everything either. So like if someone were to ask you like have you ever like gambled like way too much and lost all kinds of money, you don't have to say like, yep, I did that 10 years ago. Like someone else doesn't have a right to know that about you. So it's really not like a right question to be asking. You don't have to say like, I don't want to talk about that because you have no right to know about that either. So you don't have to like reveal. It's not lying to say I'm not going to reveal things about myself that really don't belong to other people's knowledge.